This week on Hope City Overtime, we talk about what it means to live in reconciliation. This is a challenging one. So make sure you like, subscribe. Let's get it.
Welcome to Hope City Overtime, a weekly podcast where we take a little more time to dive into Sunday's message. And we've made it to August and a new season. It feels kind of crazy that we're already done with Romans.
Yeah.
Summer came. Summer's on its way out.
We're in a new season?
We're in a new season in my mind.
What season are we in?
It's August already.
The August season.
Can you believe it?
It's like
I thought I
pre-fall.
missed the season.
A new season of life.
Yeah.
School is starting.
Let's get it.
And
Sweater
here we are.
time.
I know. I hope it stays cool. I don't think it will.
Sweater weather.
I've been in
I know.
Charlotte long enough to know
I'm
it'll
taking
get hot
advantage.
again.
I'm taking advantage.
And we're in a brand new series.
Yep.
Started a series called Go. And before we get into this message from this past Sunday, I wanted to talk a little bit about the heart behind the series. And I know you, John Gonzalez, were really the one who the Lord kind of put this in your heart. So just wondered if you'd share a little bit about how the idea came about.
Yeah, it was funny because this has been a message that has been in my notes for years. And it was just literally go. And there were just some key staple statements Jesus made. Like the biggest one for me being go and make disciples. And then just seeing the go and sin no more. Like every time Jesus, well, not every time, but oftentimes when Jesus even healed people, there was a clear instruction afterwards. So I felt like it was something that stuck. I just never really explored it. So that's when I just kind of offered it to Pastor John as a potential series that maybe we can explore if it fit into where we were going as a church. And it kind of did. So it was cool.
Yeah. Any thoughts after he brought it to you?
No,
Just like sometimes how we come up with the...
It seemed very timely. Like we as a church have been just excited about what's next and prayerfully consider what the Lord is saying and doing. And often there is a propensity within church culture to kind of grow stagnant, and there's a lot of coming. So you come to church and you do this, like it's a lot of, I don't know, it almost can become receiving, a little selfish. So the indication of this message, like the instruction of this message is go. So it just felt like the right time. And it felt like the Lord was kind of putting the foot down on the gas a little bit as far as where he was taking us. So it seemed like it fit. And, 1 week in. Sounds good. Feels like it was working.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's funny that you said that because I actually love the way that you framed the beginning of this message was not immediately jumping into all the times that Jesus says go, but actually talking about the invitations that he gives us to come and rest, to come and eat. That one was a favorite in the services that I was in.
That's a good one. That's the best one.
To come and see, to come and inherit.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's important to consider those invitations before we jump straight into his commandments to go?
Again, I think the invitation for us to come is to get to know who he is. And as we get to know who he is, we then learn who we are. I think we do we're so quick to want to just do something for him. And we find ourselves trying to do something and our character or where we at, it can't really keep up with what it is that we're trying to do. So then we end up doing more harm than good. And even with Christ, you see him 3 years, he's with his disciples and he's training them and he's preparing them to go out and then go. So I felt like the invitation for us to come is so important because we find rest in him. We find who we are. Healing takes place. And then we could be more effective at doing the mission, which is going out and telling. So it was. I think it's profound for each of us to just learn how to accept the invitation and learn how to just be with him before we want to start telling people what they need to do for him. So
yeah, and I think having those experiences too, and being in those moments where he's speaking and moving in your life, and I think we talked about the experiences of the invitation. Then it's the next logical step is like, man, I had this amazing moment. I want to share it. I want to take it to people. I want to find people to share this with. So I feel like that it's, even from a logical perspective, it's just in order.
It's good.
Yeah. So the ones that you mentioned on Sunday or come and rest. So that's the come to me, all who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Come and eat, where he said, now come and have some
Yes, Lord.
breakfast. Come and drink, where he's talking to the woman at the well and says, come and drink of the living water that I have to offer. Come and see. And then there's come and inherit. For you personally, in the season that you're in right now, which one of these is the most meaningful to you? Which invitation?
I feel like I can't cheat and say come and eat at this point.
I mean, you said it on the stage.
Honestly, I think the come and inherit is probably kind of that one that I'm kind of sitting in right now, because just looking forward to what God's doing in our church, like it gets me excited and kind of has some of my focus starting to point towards that eternal, more of that eternal thought process.
It's good.
Mine would be come and rest. I think that could be a challenge for me, especially just mentally finding rest and not allowing my mind to just constantly start thinking about things that still have to get done. It's hard for me to, it's becoming harder for me to take naps because I feel like I'm wasting time. And I know it's important to rest, so I think that one is a big one for me.
Yeah. What about you?
I mean, come and see or come and hear. Like, I love all these invitations because they're invitations to proximity. Like it's come and get close. And in that closeness, you're gonna find rest. You're gonna find nourishment, refreshing. You're gonna see and hear all that I'm doing. And I'm just in that season. And I think I have been for the last several, I would even argue maybe a year or two, where it's just been trying to keep my head focused on what he's saying and doing and seeing all that he, so in my role, there is a part of what I do that requires me to keep my eyes on what he's doing. So that see part is critical. And sometimes I'm, seeing what nobody else sees yet and trying to get other people to see what's coming down the road. So I think those would be the two, between seeing and hearing. I think the difference is when we see, it's a lot of personal interpretation. It's working through our filters. But when we hear, we're hearing from him and him alone, like, and that voice gets a little bit more specific. So I don't know if those two things are much different, but I find a little bit of nuance in that.
Yeah, I like that. I think it's interesting. I hadn't noticed before now how sensory they are. Like we get to fully experience God, like not just the disciples who were there when Jesus was present in human body, but there is such an invitation to
taste and see and hear and feel.
Yeah.
That invitation to touch his scars.
There's no come and
loved
smell,
that.
but that's probably good.
Well, yeah.
I think for me, it's come and drink, that idea of the living water. We're in a season that, like, even now I'm teetering between overwhelmed and like excited. There's just so much happening as we get ready to step into the fall, and specifically with this Elizabeth expression, that this idea of living water, that it's constantly flowing. Like, I just feel like the Lord is reminding me, just step into this place where you're drinking of living water. And then it's not like a drink and then go do this thing and then come back, but it's this constant flow of just being in his presence.
It's good.
Yeah, it's still a practice that I'm learning.
I've always loved that invitation in the story, because they're at the end of a festival where everybody is thirsty, and he's standing all but at the exit, and he's saying, all who are thirsty, come drink of me. And that, that living water that when you drink, you'll never be thirsty again. And so, like, he uses this moment where people have a physical need to point them to the spiritual truth of this refreshing that he offers. So I've always loved the story.
So these are the invitations, and I love that idea of these are about who we are, like being in his presence, understanding that, and then this command to go comes out of that. It almost feels like an invitation when you're living in that place of his presence, that yes, it is a command, but it's also like, oh my gosh, he's inviting me to go be part of what he's doing. And so this week we started with this idea of go and reconcile. And that comes out of Matthew chapter 5. I love these are so short that I can read the whole passage. He says, so if you're presenting a sacrifice at the altar in the temple and you suddenly remember that someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice there at the altar. go and be reconciled to that person, then come and offer your sacrifice to God. And you did talk about this yesterday, but I want to talk about what it actually means to reconcile, to be reconciled, because it's a word we use a lot and hear a lot in different contexts. But sometimes you need to kind of get back to the basics of what is he actually saying here?
Yeah. In the simplest form, it's literally just to restore. But we did go into a definition more. Is that what you're pulling up now or no? The actual definition of it?
To conciliate anew.
Yeah, I didn't use
So
that
easy
one.
to
'cause,
understand.
I can't use a definition that even I have to look up.
When you have to
That
define
was-
the definition.
That was John. I was like, that's on him. He can conciliate.
You definitely use that second part though.
I definitely
Yeah.
did. I definitely did.
The callback in the union is really kind of it infers that there's a relationship that's been broken, and it's a restoration of that relationship.
Yeah, the conciliation.
Yeah,
Conciliation.
anew.
Yeah,
To conciliate anew.
I mean it's reconciliate, so it's the second part
To
of it.
reconciliate.
yeah.
Conciliation.
I love
You know,
After
it made me
Lunch
think of The
podcast.
Godfather, because The Godfather had the guy who actually did a lot of his business was called the Conciliary.
Oh,
So I don't know if it,
Yeah.
but that's
I've
literally
never
what I
seen
thought of
those
that.
I've
movies.
never
Yeah.
seen The Godfather.
I don't
either,
watch
yeah.
movies of the world, so
Yeah, I've never.
No one at
We're
this
so
table.
young.
I know it is a classic.
actually, I have seen it.
It's on TV 6,000 times a week.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I'm too
sorry.
busy doing the work of the Lord to
Yeah.
watch. No, I watch a lot of TV.
Don't worry, I got that yesterday too because I brought up the
Van Halen.
Sammy Hagar,
Sammy
Van
Hagar
Hagar,
thing, yeah.
and the room was quite quiet, and I was like, okay, I'm the only one.
But that's
who
not
listens to
because you're
rock.
not saved and they are. It's because you're old.
Well,
Sammy Hagar is an old
When did The
reference.
Godfather come out?
yeah,
You're right. You're right. Van Halen, let's go.
They're closer to 50, so
That is true. John and Justin are close to 50.
yeah.
John and I are close to 40.
Yeah.
You can guess which John is which.
Are you closer to 40 or 50? You are. You just turned 40.
I will turn 40 in a few months.
And then
Don't
how
rush
long have
it.
you been 40?
I've been 43 times already. 43.
Perspective.
Perspective. That's right.
Yeah.
It's funny. I had a dinner with some friends a couple years ago, and we all sat down. It's like, hey guys, we're closer to 50 than we are to 40, and they all looked at me. It was like the end of the dinner. They were so mad. I'm like, I don't know why everybody's mad, dude. 50 is a great year. Let's
Yeah.
go.
This is not super related, but kind of a beautiful thing. There's a date next week that at North, there's someone turning 25, 50, and 75 all on the same day.
That's awesome.
Look
Yeah,
at that.
I'll not divulge who they are in case they don't want their ages known. But that's the beauty of church, right? You're doing life with people in different life stages. God's faithfulness is evident in all of them. So
Yeah.
John and I get to sit here at the feet of our elders and learn from your wisdom today. So
true.
reconciliation. After this podcast, how are we going to reconcile?
To each other.
You did this great job of presenting that there are a couple different types of reconciliation that we see in Scripture, and we often focus on our relationship with one another, and that is what Jesus is talking about, like when he says, "Go and be reconciled." But I think that only comes when we've experienced reconciliation with God. I don't have a fully developed question around this, but I just kind of want to talk about those two types of reconciliation and how they're connected to each other. So go.
Yeah, I actually think this is a part of the message that between this and the passage in the Colossians passage at the end that really kind of spoke to me. Because I think we often think about our relationship with others and our relationship with God in two different columns. So you'll hear people say, like, I love Jesus, I just don't like his people.
Yeah.
And yet in this passage, Jesus is saying that the way that you love people and the way that you navigate relationship with people directly affects worship, right? So you have a problem with your brother, stop what you're doing at the altar in the process of worship. Stop worship, reconcile with your brother, and then it's aligning your heart back so that the worship is now pure and right and truthful. So I think we have moved in 2025 to this place where our relationship with God, we try to subtract people from it. And yet I would argue that over and over in the Gospels, there's this reminder that how you love one another is a reflection of the health of your relationship with the Lord. So that to me was the hard part of this message, and the part that just had me over and over, just making sure that I'm examining the scripture right. Because when we think of worship, when we think of offering sacrifice to the Lord, it's so high and elevated, and this thing of purity, and bring it to me, and I love that. And yet Jesus is saying, hey, before you do that, reconcile with your brother, because if there's friction there and there's a lack of reconciliation there, then this worship is not true. So I do think that that's a big part of it's a beautiful picture of what harmony looks like. Reconciliation with one another echoes the heart of reconciliation between you and the Father. And when those two things are in alignment, worship is pure and right.
I think the bombshell of that too, and I know I'm jumping way forward in this too a little bit. The bombshell of that though is where we ended up at the end of the sermon, where it was like, it's not just if I have a problem with you, it's if I think you have a problem with me.
Yeah.
That's where I was kind of like, oh my, now this gets much more difficult.
Well, that's where that Colossians passage kind of put me on my back a little bit this week.
Yeah. So since you brought it up, let's kind of go there, because I want to unpack that, because I think I had a different initial response to what that meant than you guys did, just hearing the way you presented it on stage, because that to me is almost freeing. Like, because there are people that I could have a problem with who aren't willing to reconcile, that I can only go a certain amount. But when it's what he's saying is dependent on if people have a problem with you, go and be reconciled to them, that's actually freeing to me, because I'm like, oh, well, that's within my control. It's not necessarily easy.
Yeah.
It requires humility. It requires understanding all the different things that you kind of walked through. I know we're all over the place with this sermon, but to me, I like that idea. But it sounded like it made it more difficult.
Yeah, because if someone has an issue with me and I'm over it and they're not, I'm good.
Yeah.
Right? I know that's not, and maybe it's just wiring, and maybe we're talking about, maybe some of this is the way that we're wired as men, versus your wiring as a woman. I don't know. But I do know that for a lot of, at least from my study as I was reading this, there's that thought in the back of your head, like, if I'm done with this, why do I need to revisit? If you're still struggling with it, you're struggling with it. Like, that's on you to try to figure out, if you have an issue with me, that's like, how do I even navigate that? So I do think that often it's easier for me to dismiss if you have a problem with me than if I had a problem with you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. What would you say then if there's someone that you've done your best to make something right, and to be humble, to apologize if that's required, like to do all this work of reconciliation, and then that person continues to have a problem, and to a point, because this is a made up scenario, like where it really is kind of becoming their problem, like it's almost a habit, there's unforgiveness in them. What would you say is our responsibility then when Jesus says, go and be reconciled before you come back to worship, when it does take two parties to actually reconcile?
It's a good question. I think ultimately that's the challenge of reconciliation, that it's work and it's messy, right? So we can only live in the example that's been laid out by the cross. All the work of reconciliation has been done. Now, whether or not people say yes to the invitation to step into that reconciliation, that's on them. So if I've had the conversation, if I've done the work, if I leverage the apologies that need to be leveraged, if I've tried with all that I can to present a way back to restoration and reconciliation, and it's still not accepted, I've done what I needed to do. Now, again, I want to be clear, because some of this, like, people will interpret as, oh, they're giving me someone the right to live in the place of abuse. And I just need you to hear me. That is never the case. If those relationships are abusive, if those boundaries were well crossed and you've established good, moving regardless, like you got to be mindful of those boundaries. Abuse is never acceptable. With that said, the responsibility of this passage is that we would do the work that's necessary to bring about reconciliation. Now, whether they accept that invitation or not, that's on them. Once I've leveraged that work, then I'm free to worship with a clear mind and a full heart, which is a challenge, because I think sometimes, to the point that was made to some degree, I think reconciliation, there's this expectation that it's going to go back to what it was. And I think that's an unfair expectation.
Yeah.
Sometimes reconciliation means on the other side, the relationship looks different, but there's not the brokenness there. We just have decided that the connection needs to be new and it needs to look different, and we're okay with that. So,
and I think that's where that concept of barriers can really come in really well too, because like you said, it's not about putting yourself in a spot of abuse or staying in abuse, but having those safe guardrails that I've done what it is I'm supposed to do. I've pursued this. You haven't accepted the invitation or whatnot. I need to put up some guardrails to protect myself too from those potential bad falls.
yeah.
One of the things that has just been kind of going around in my brain is the freedom curriculum, which we love, talks about living unoffended and talks about unforgiveness. And I know forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing, but they're related. And one of the things they mention, kind of to your point, is that you can live in a place where you have fully forgiven someone, where you have laid down any offense, but that doesn't mean that relationship picks back up. You can be at peace with each other, but you're not
Absolutely
stepping into,
Well, I mean, because it's an unfair expectation. Often when there's seasons of tension between two people, it starts in one season. Now you're 20 years removed, 10 years removed, 5 years removed even. Now they're living in a different season. They got married. They have 2 or 3 kids. Maybe their kids have graduated from high school or college. Maybe they're retirees. And so one season looks different than the other. So the expectations cannot be that it's the same thing that it was. That's, when we were best friends and we hung out every moment together and we were 18 and now we're 35. And restoration doesn't mean that we're going to hang out all the time. And, it's not the same season. So it can't even look the same. And to put that expectation, I think, is unfair. That's why I love the way the Freedom Book navigates this issue, because I do think that forgiveness has a lot to do with reconciliation.
Yeah.
And, it doesn't mean that you're restoring an old relationship. It just means that you're not allowing the bitterness, resentment, and anger to settle in. We've resolved that already. So I think that that's what's critical.
Yeah. So I'm going to kind of back up in the sermon, and we'll get back into some of this stuff. But you talked about standards. Like, part of why we go and reconcile is that we are part of the family of God, and that family comes with standards. And I know everyone kind of mentioned some standards that they've had to live up to, but are there specific things that come to mind of times where either at work or in your family you've become aware of needing to live up to standards, whether they're good standards or unfair standards?
I mean, the example I used yesterday was a very direct example in my mind of those standards for one of the companies I worked for, just some of the things I was trying to, without going all back into the story again, I was literally trying to make some equipment that we spent lots of money buying. And what I was making was not even like the cheapest, most horrific knockoff version, but it was unsafe. It was unusable. It was not efficient. And sitting down with one of my engineers and him just laying me out going, dude, we have a standard here, and I think the thing that when I was trying to put that illustration together in my mind, the thing that I kept coming back to was, like, I remember him talking about, like, this is a safety thing. If you show up with this piece of equipment and something bad were to happen, you were to drop it, break equipment, hurt someone, like, the company is not going to support you because this didn't go through any of the proper channels.
Yeah.
So there's that safety in being part of that standard, that I've got people around me who are going to support me when things go wrong and help lift me up and help me understand, hey, this isn't the standard, and move forward.
It's good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't really grow up where, my parents were to say, this is who we are, like, as people, or using our last name. Like, that wasn't really how I grew up. So I didn't really adapt to that, even with my
That's
kids
so
now.
interesting, because I do feel like your family has a strong identity, like GFAM. You almost
Yeah.
have your own brand.
Yeah, so even with the GFAM came more from we're God's family. Like that
Oh,
was
I didn't
that was the
realize
bulk
that.
of it. It just so happened
You just
because
happen to have a last
Gonzalez,
name that
it
starts with a
worked.
G.
It worked with it. But that was the whole thing. It started when we were doing music. Like, what would we want people to be known by? I didn't want to pick anything that I felt was about us. So if someone were to ask, I said, we just feel like we're members of his family. That's kind of how it started. So
So I'm in the G fam?
you're in the G family.
I'm in the L fam, the Lord's fam.
But I do think the standard that I set more with my family is because we bear his name. Like I would challenge my kids even young not to be hypocrites. Like don't act like something you're not. Like so my standard is genuinely like, yo, if you're gonna be this, like be it. And allow his love to be seen and felt through you. Because what you say to lip service means nothing. It's only a matter of time when people will see it. So that's been the biggest thing for me, like for my kids, just to be truly genuine to the faith that they're clinging to. But yeah, that's been more of my standard. Not to try to sound like it's so spiritual. I didn't grow up around the other way, so he's kind of been the goal of mine in a sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I shared one on Sunday about my family. I think one of the standards was my first ministry opportunity. I had a lead pastor who was really adamant about time. Time was a big thing to him. So he always used to use language that communicated the importance of time. Like he used to say things like, to be late to a meeting is to steal. Right. So if you're 10 minutes late to the meeting, you've now stole 10 minutes from me. So you've broken 2 commands of the Lord because you've lied to me and now you've stolen my time. And
That's
yeah,
a bit harsh.
yeah.
I mean,
To the point that I remember, but again, the standard wasn't just spoken, it was set. I never beat the guy into work. Our day started at 9. I could be there as early as 6 a.m. and he was there before me.
Wow.
And our day ended at 5. I promise you his light was on 6, 7 o'clock at night sometimes. Like you can never beat him there. And he was always there. I mean, bare minimum 5 o'clock. I've never seen him leave earlier than that. It's a little extreme, but it was the standard. And to his credit, he communicated it clearly and then would turn around. And in seasons, I remember one particular employee that or pastor who worked for me, but also was a part of the pastoral team. He worked in our department and I oversaw him, was having a hard time with time. Just showing up on time was an issue to this guy, and then it was jovial. It was, island time, I can come when I, Hispanic time, that type of nonsense. And I remember the lead pastor was like, he doesn't know our standard. So now it's your responsibility to teach him. And like, I got to my wit's end and he was like, it's just because you've been the standard has not been clearly communicated. I was like, what does that mean? He's like, okay, if he, moving forward, and he did it himself out of his own budget, he bought a time clock for the kid and said, now you're punching in. And if you are more than 10 minutes late, I'm docking your pay. That kid was on time for the rest of his time there. And it's a silly illustration and maybe a little harsh one, but our leadership was quick to remind us of the precious nature of what it means to be in occupational ministry. It doesn't mean you get to wake up when you want, show up when you want. He's like, he quickly used examples. Doctors and lawyers can't show up late to court. You can't show up late to the doctor's room. And he was quick to be like, what we do has eternal significance. And I'm going to carry myself with that standard. Again, was it a conviction more than it was an issue of sin? I would absolutely agree. But to him, that was the standard that's set. And I think Jesus, in the same way, maybe not so aggressively, maybe aggressively, I don't know, is communicating clearly. Reconciliation is my standard. Matter of fact, we didn't do this, but Paul later on says that we have been given the ministry of reconciliation. That not only is our standard, it's our ministry. Like that's the intention and purpose of a child of God, is a part of what we do is reconcile, because the world is being reconciled into him. And if we can't reconcile with each other, what's that even say about the God that we serve?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I think you could say that Jesus, or at least God speaking through John,
yeah,
was that direct and harsh to an extent, because You hit on this passage, 1 John 4:20. If someone says, I love God, but hates a fellow believer, that person is a liar.
Liar.
Yeah.
Straight up.
I don't know why I said it like that, but I did. Even on Sunday, I said liar.
To make it light when it's kind of a, ooh.
Yeah.
For if we don't love people we can see, how can we love God whom we cannot see? Because it is part of the standard. It's funny, the way my parents said it, I couldn't think of an actual standard that they set. I'm sure there were, but I remember like before I started going to school, like not off to college, but like to elementary school. And then if we would have field trips, they would be like, remember, you're a Kramer when you're outside of the house too. And so you carry this name, and the actions that you take reflect on our family. Like you have this name. And I think they were just like, so listen to your teachers. But that idea of like, Christ gives us his name when we choose to follow him, which I still sometimes want to be like, are you sure?
That's that inheritance part. Yeah.
For sure.
But then it does mean that we have a standard. And if God is love, who are we to bear his name and not love one another to the point of messy reconciliation?
But to your point earlier, we can only do because we are. We can only do out of the be. If we put the cart in front of the horse, we're trying our hardest to do in order to prove that we are, versus no, I'm transformed by the renewing of my mind. I've been given over to the Spirit of God. I live my life in this place of sacrifice, willing to lay it down, so that yes, I can reconcile with others, even if it doesn't make sense, even if I struggle to understand why, even if it takes the humility of approaching an issue that I have figured in my head was done, but it's not. So,
So this is legitimately a question for you, because I got to sit through the sermon twice, which means I had double time to think about questions. So the 1 John passage is very clear. If someone says, I love God, but hates a fellow believer. So they're talking about the relationship between brothers and sisters within the body of Christ. But what Jesus says in the passage in Matthew is, if you remember that someone has something against you. So to the best of my knowledge, I didn't do a deep dive on.
So I did a little.
Okay, because I'm curious if there's a difference.
Yeah, no. So I've done a little. First of all, I would argue that reconciliation is a good practice in and outside of the faith. Like whether a person is a child of God or not, I'm not here to argue that that's not a bad idea or a good idea. Most would agree that the indication that they're in the temple is an indicator that he's speaking to the people who are in the temple. So if you have a problem with your brother and you see him,
Okay.
right, like that indicator that the brother is in the temple. But also remember, culturally, everyone was in the temple, right? So if you had an issue with your neighbor down the street, culturally, this fits. So I think in one arm, on one leg, I mess these up all the time, these little sayings.
One hand.
On one hand, thank you. On one finger. No, on one hand. On one hand, I think this is a strong push, and through the totality of Scripture, I would argue that it's critical we live in a place where we reconcile with brothers and sisters, because ultimately it is a reflection of the love of God. How will the world know of the love of our Father except that we would love one another, right? So you can go from Paul to John to Moses, and you see throughout Scripture in the totality of it, this picture of the importance of the love for one another and living in this place of harmony among the children of God. With that said, reconciliation is available to all. So there is a point here that I would argue, on the other hand, that it's important to live in reconciliation with others. I would also tell you, to your point earlier, it is a little tougher when they don't understand your why. So
And they're not pursuing the same standard.
Exactly.
That's kind of where in my pondering I'd landed, well, we know it doesn't always work out that way. Like, we all live in the real world, but the hope is that when we're interacting with other believers, in the same way that we're trying to humble ourselves, that we're seeking to understand, not just be heard, they are approaching it the same way, out of the same motivation, so that we can we can realistically reach that place, but you cannot assume that same standard of people who haven't ascribed to that standard. So that's kind of where I, in my head, was like, well, that makes sense.
I
So
still
it
think
could
it's
be possible.
I still think it's important to do the work of
Our
drawing the bridges,
whatever's under our control.
Yeah,
but it is
leveraging the
messy.
forgiveness. Well, because at the end of the day, the thing that I think we forget is bitterness can settle in on both ends of that relationship. And so this is a warning against bitterness. I would argue, to John's point in the writing, that God is more concerned with the gift, with your heart than the gift that you bring. And the reason why reconciliation is an issue is because when there is no reconciliation and there is tension that you live with among brothers and sisters, it does create a place for bitterness and resentment to establish its hold on your heart. So I think this is a warning in this passage as much as it's a command.
Mm-hmm. So the result that we see, like we talked about how God cares more about who we are than what we do. That's a lot of what's in the heart of this. Like I think of, is it Micah or Isaiah? Whatever the prophet was like, I hate all your show. Like this has the same kind of feel to it of like, I don't want you to come and offer sacrifices. I don't want you to come and put on this performance of worship when you know that there's real work of reconciliation that needs to happen. And, but it doesn't mean that he doesn't care at all about the sacrifice.
No.
And I think that was a good point because you can almost think like, okay, so the takeaway is that I need to live in harmony with my brothers and sisters, but the worship part isn't a big deal. How would you say that our worship interacts with our willingness to reconcile?
I think it goes to the obedience part. And that's one of the highest forms of worship and love to the Father, me truly obeying him, allowing him to be Lord of my life where I submit to him. So I think walking in obedience and sacrifice is hand in hand, because your obedience will lead you to do a lot of things that are sacrifices to yourself, your comfort, your flesh. And that is seen as love to the Father. I think when we run strictly to the sacrifice, that's kind of more self-doing. And I can kind of be the center of that. But when my sacrifice comes out of a heart of obedience, it's a different posture in it. And I think that sets the tone for my true worship to the Father, just walking in obedience in all ways.
Other thoughts?
Yeah.
What he said.
Ditto.
Well done. I do think, to your point, obedience is worship. Like, I would argue that process of stepping away to reconcile is an act of worship when we're doing it out of love for God, and also out of awareness of how much he's done to reconcile us to him. And then to the point, like, there's freedom in worship once you've done that. Like, how many times, because I don't live this out as well as I would like to, like, there have been times where I'm distracted on a Sunday because I know that there's something broken in a relationship, and it's not necessarily because I'm walking in disobedience, but like, it's my job to be here on Sunday. So sometimes I have a phone call that's happening afterwards, or and I can't fully be in the moment, but the way it feels when that thing has resolved, like, oh my gosh. Yeah.
So we use the illustration of husband and wife Sunday. We basically said, you can't tell me that you love me, but man, I hate your wife, or I hate your children. And then when I was driving home, I took a little bit of a different twist on it just in my head. For those of you who might not know, I'm kind of a hobbyist when it comes to pottery. And I have my pottery displayed all over my office. So if you came into my office and said, man, I love you as a creator, but I hate your pots, it just doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
Right? So I think if worship is, I love you, my Father, the creator, but I hate your children, your creation, I think it doesn't make sense. So to your point, it realigns our heart and gives us the freedom to say, no, I'm in love with what you're doing in the life of the people around me, and it's worship. Like that's the beauty is drawing love for what God has made and also expressing that to the Father. And I think that's why he's quick to be like, if there's not reconciliation, these things don't line up. They just don't make sense.
Yeah. What would you say to someone who's in a situation where they desire that reconciliation and it's just, it might not be possible. It could be with someone who's already passed away or someone whose children have maybe just walked away and kind of broken that relationship. How would you encourage them who are hearing this and are like, I want that, but I don't even have a way to communicate with the person that I would like to be reconciled with?
I would just argue again, do the work that's necessary on your side of the bridge. That's all you can do, right? If you're dealing with loved ones who've passed, what does it look like to forgive? What does it look like to do the work of uprooting some of that bitterness? Having good conversations with people you trust to help in that process, holding you accountable to the way that you're thinking, making reconciliation a part of your prayer focus. And then with those who are still alive, but are distant or disconnected or have estranged themselves, I would again just argue, do your work on your side of the bridge. Do everything you can. Again, that's the beautiful picture we have in the example of Christ, like laying his life down, building the bridge and saying, all right, if anyone wants life, they have to come through me. Doing your work that's necessary. And then if the opportunity makes itself known, whether it's in this life or the next, I don't believe in reincarnation. I don't know why that sounds like I do, but whether it's in this season or the next is probably the better phrase. I do think it's critical that you don't allow that disconnection, that lack of reconciliation, again, to allow bitterness to settle in, anger to settle in, and resentment to settle in, that you're doing your work.
Mm-hmm.
And I like what you said there, and I feel like it's been kind of our theme for the day as an overall in a lot of our meetings today. You're doing the work of building the bridge.
Yeah.
It's still up to them to walk across it, but you're doing everything you can to give them the opportunity, the pathway, that road that's being built for them to then step forward into it.
It's good.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm kind of jumping all over the place. We rushed way ahead and I'm moving back, but you got really practical. It's okay. You got really practical about how to pursue reconciliation. And so the things that you talked about, it was funny because in my head I was like, this is so practical. What are we going to talk about on the podcast? Where I'm usually like, so practically, how would we? But you said make reconciliation a priority and to seek the Lord in prayer on that, to examine your heart, check your spirit and your motives, commit to the process, that it doesn't happen overnight. Healing takes time. I think that one was the one that I needed to hear the most, of just like, oh yeah, sometimes this takes time. Things don't often break overnight and they don't often heal overnight. Have the hard conversations in love and listen to and value others' perspectives. And that's that seek to understand and not to be heard. But with have the hard conversations in love, you had this idea of use a mediator if needed. How would you recommend going about finding the right person to mediate in that situation? There are all sorts of people who want to be all up in the tea and like, I'll mediate for you. But I think that's an important role to have the right person step into. Or did you mean an actual legal mediator? Because those are real too.
I mean, sometimes you don't have a choice.
Yeah, you might need it.
I don't know. I mean, I think you can kind of, some of us, we can pinpoint who that person is that is not looking forward to be in that conversation. Like they are such a humble, stable, sound person. You trust their spirit and discernment, or you could bring them in the fold. For some of us that don't, you can ask around and say, man, I really need a third party. I want to treat this conversation well and steward our relationship well. Is there someone that I can kind of ask to bring in this? Maybe someone in our church, maybe a leadership or a pastor of some sort. And I think addressing that speaks volume of the respect you have for the other person, as well as the character that you want to walk in, that you're willing to bring a third party in, that you now have to be humble enough to let them hear what's going on. And I wish we'd even have to take it this far, but we do. And because I want to treat this well and steward each other's relationship, I do feel this is the most responsible thing I can do. And you go that route. So I think, if you know someone, cool. If not, kind of seek out the counsel of others around you who could be that person to then help you guys bring resolution to what's going on, or at least a game plan that you can execute to hopefully bring proper reconciliation.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not blanket statement saying all of us are available for all of that, but I think all of us have played that role at different times within the church, sometimes as finding a pastor or an elder who can kind of step in and help, because sometimes you do need that person to, even for yourself. Like, I've been in those situations where I need someone to just be like, you started out seeking to understand and you've gotten a little worked up, and maybe you need a 5-minute break because now all you're doing is just cycling through why your way is the better way.
Well, and even more so with that, what the thing that I'm finding more and more is the way I think I communicate isn't necessarily the case.
Yeah.
I have a very firm belief that what I'm saying is exactly what I want to say and exactly the way I want to say it and the tone I want to say it. And it's easy and clear. And then my wife looks at me and she's sitting here saying, no, that is not what you're saying, And so I do think this is where this helps out, because, again, sometimes what our perspective of what we're saying isn't being received or coming off that way. So
Professional counseling is a great opportunity for, in essence, in a lot of ways, specifically if you're doing like couple counseling or that's the goal, is mediation, right? Like somebody who can sit in the middle and say, this is what I'm hearing. That's what you're saying. Do you understand what they're doing? Like Jess and I did. We talk about it often, but we did about 10 years worth of marriage counseling, not because the marriage was bad, but because we were navigating like deep seasons of infertility and trying to figure out what's going on. And then even when we adopted the boys and things are looking up, there's still stuff that we were walking through. And just to know, at least twice a month on Tuesdays, we jump in a car, drive close to an hour away to sit with one of our incredible counselors, and that voice would add some leverage to the conversation and move us forward.
Yeah. So don't be afraid to ask for that.
No.
Because we all need it in different relationships and different seasons. Okay. Cutting room floor. What didn't make the message or hasn't made this conversation that you want to make sure we talk about with this?
I feel like I'm a broken record because, again, in our staff meetings, we've talked through some of this stuff. I've brought this up several times, but Pastor John, you actually hit that spot, and we hit it a little bit earlier about when you do get through the reconciliation, that season may look totally different. That's the spot for boundaries and all that kind of stuff. I wish I would have had more of that. I wish I could have brought that forward, because even some of the comments that I talked with some people afterwards were like, even after you reconcile, you've made things right, but that doesn't mean that this is a relationship that you need to be in.
Oh, good word.
And so I wish I would have had more of that. I wish I would have caught on to that quicker and been able to bring that out.
Yeah, that was a good point. I didn't bring that up either. So that would have been a good point to bring up as well, I think. Yeah, that oftentimes healing, you have a wound as a byproduct of that healing. You're still healed, but there is a wound that is a reminder of, the state that thing used to be in, but that scar is a reminder of what you went through. So it probably would have been good to kind of highlight that so that we don't have unrealistic expectations for what this looks like.
Yeah, I like that phrase, be at peace with someone, because that can identify that you are forgiven, like everything is at peace, but not that you're best friends again. Or
No more inside jokes.
No more inside jokes, but you're at peace with one another.
For me, it's the part I spent good amount of time on that I wish I had more time. Maybe the message needed a whole nother message, because when I hear the idea of reconciliation one to another, it's easy to get into the vein of justice. Like, that's not fair. Who needs to reach out to who? What's just? I don't want to be a doormat. I don't want to be treated wrong. I have my rights. There's my feelings to consider. And I'm not arguing that all of those things need to be questioned and considered and walked through. But when you consider the price that was paid for the Father to reconcile men unto himself, it just pales in comparison. There's my one and only Son leveraged against humanity's sin. He became sin for us. In order that we would be reconciled. The more I study that, the more I spend time on that, the more I'm floored. I think the part that messed me up this week the most was that we get to stand before the Father without fault. And I think
because of what he did while we were his enemies.
And while he was enemies. And because of our evil thoughts.
Yeah.
And because of our wickedness.
Yeah.
But I said this at both in both services, but I think across the board where I would love to have spent more time is I like every aspect of my life I can pick fault for you if that's what you're asking me. When I look at myself through your lens, my faults as a leader, when I look at myself through the lens of the church's eyes, like my faults as a pastor, and I'm not trying to say woe is me by any stretch, but when we take honest evaluation, we can see the faults and the failures in my wife's eyes as a husband, in my kids' eyes as a father, in my neighbor's eyes as a neighbor, in my friend's eyes as a friend, in my own mirror. It's easy for me to see faults. And yet, because of the beauty of reconciliation and the grace of the Savior, we can stand before the Almighty Father who knows every way we should be, and he finds no fault. Yeah. That was my sermon this week, the sermon for me.
Yeah. It's powerful. I mean, and it takes away, it makes you sound silly when you're like, but do I really need to?
They called me a weird name when I was 12. Yeah. And that's not to belittle anybody's issue at reconciling. I know that there's some people who have scarred you deeply. And I know that there's some issues that have left you hurting and limp. And I know that there's some conversations that you have. And unfortunately, you didn't even know when you scarred someone deeply and you got to deal with that. But again, he wore the scars of my sin. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, on that note, where are we heading?
Go and tell. So I think John being used by the Spirit of God, I don't even know if he did this intentionally, but the way that we ordered these messages has lined up. Because you can't go and tell until you figured out this reconciliation part. But now that you have, that the next step is this intentional step of just purpose. Like we are called to go and tell. So I'm excited about that, which then leads us to our big Sunday at the park.
I know, it's hard to believe it's less than 2 weeks away.
It is less than 2 weeks, August 17th.
August 17th.
10 o'clock, Hauser Pavilion,
at
UNCC Charlotte.
Something I've been asked about in this several times. I said it Sunday. Just show up.
Yeah.
You don't need to bring anything.
Nope.
Except your friends and family and neighbors and coworkers.
But you don't
and
need to bring
everyone
any
you can
food,
shove in a van.
On the highways and byways.
desserts.
No,
We got it all.
that's it. I mean, if you want to play some dominoes, you can bring some bones.
Yeah.
Those are dominoes.
Yeah. So if you're part of the Hope City family and you've been around for the last 5 weeks, we've been praying over people's names on these sticky notes. We've talked about interceding and investing. Now is the time, if you haven't invited, to make sure that you've moved to that invitation time. This will drop on Wednesday. We're 10 days away. We're excited. We're expectant. We've been praying. Pastor Joey and his team have been working like crazy to make sure that the setup is all exactly what we need. I think we've got some big fans. I mean, right now it's so cool. We would be just fine. But if it's gotten hot again, we're ready to go. And
They actually have big fans there.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
But we may not need them, but we may, because it's August in Charlotte. So it could be 110 degrees or 70.
Yep.
But we believe that more than just being a good event, that this could change eternity for some of the people who show up. So be praying, be inviting. and we'll be there on August 17th. But first, we'll be back at North and West at 9 and 11 on Sunday to talk about what it means to go and tell. See you then.